All right, welcome to episode 70 of Enter the Mind podcast, the most real talk and no nonsense podcast on the empowering of the mind. In today's episode, we are very excited to interview Ann Hince, spiritual teacher, public speaker, and author. She's got a lot to offer in regards to understanding your mind, and from what I've read, understanding how that also connects to the body. So there's so much to go over. I don't even know where to start. Ann, I'm just going to pass it to you and can you get the ball rolling for us?
Sure. Thank you. It's great to be here. Yeah. So my story starts in childhood. I had a lot of trauma in childhood. I think a lot of us do, not necessarily different there. Both of my parents were alcoholics. So it was a traumatic childhood. And then when I was 19, I walked into the bathroom one morning and found my mother dead in the bathroom. So that in itself was a huge trauma. But what I didn't realize is how much I had kept that suppressed for all these years. So it wasn't until I was in my late 30s and I went to a doctor's appointment and he asked me how stressed I was. And I was way more stressed than I should have been at the time because I was a stay-at-home mother with 2 young boys. So it shouldn't have been too bad. Could have been quite bad, but it wasn't. Shouldn't have been that bad. And so he used this technique with me that's called EFT, also called tapping, for about 15 minutes in that appointment. And we tapped through finding her and just that story. And I managed to walk away from that appointment being able to tell a story about her death in my mind with no emotion arising, because the tears had been right under the surface and they were gone. So it felt like such a huge shift for me. And I'd been looking for something that really made a difference. And this seemed like it did. But, I have an engineering background. I wanted to know that it worked. So I had a 17-year-old cat at home that needed daily saline shots. And the first time I gave him a shot, my hand was shaking so much. I just wasn't going to be able to do it every day. It just wasn't going to happen. So I thought I would try out this technique. So I tapped about my fear of hurting the cat, my fear of giving the injection, and my memories around injections. And the next time I had to give him the shot, it just slid right in. My hand was totally calm. So I knew at that point, this is really pretty powerful technique, even though it doesn't really seem it on the outside. So I started using it every day. Whenever I noticed myself feeling emotional around something, I would tap about it. And I wanted more and more. So I wrote down every emotional memory I could remember on a piece of paper, and I tapped through one each night. I probably tapped for an hour to an hour and a half each night. And I found my mind becoming quiet, which was really nice. That was one of the reasons I started this journey, because I wanted a peaceful mind. So at that point, I actually realized the words that I had been saying to myself in my mind, the ones I had been criticizing myself with and judging other people, they had actually been my dad's words that I had been programmed with in childhood. And I had just been repeating them over and over again. But it wasn't until I got beyond that and they had gone from my mind that I could actually look back and see that they were my dad's words. So that was really, I actually felt like I was living in a different reality at that point. Just things were so different. And so I kept going. I wanted more. So at this point, my awareness had expanded. And when I started out, I wasn't really aware of how I felt about anything. So I became aware of my emotions. And then the more I tapped, the more I became aware of the physical sensations underneath the emotions. Because every emotion, every word like fear or anger actually has a set of physical sensations underneath. So when I became aware of those, I actually started to use a different technique that I call feeling your feelings. It's kind of an obvious title to it, but it actually took some work and a practice to actually be able to feel those sensations and allow them to exist. And when I did, they would pass through. And I did this over and over again. I started thinking about collective traumas because I'd done a lot of my childhood ones. So I'd bring up 9/11. What does that feel like inside my body? And allow those feelings to just dissipate. And I would do this each night instead of the tapping. I would lay on the sofa and do this. And then after a while, I found that I could actually keep my awareness inside my body. And then I started doing the same thing inside my body. I'd find tension, hold my awareness on it, allow it to be, and it would dissipate and pass through. So I would do this over and over again, and I could actually then at some point get inside my head, and I would do the same thing. And then at some point I noticed that what I was doing, I could actually hear. I could actually hear what I now know is the connective tissue release. And it sounds like old tissue, old fabric ripping, which was kind of scary to begin with. First time I did it, I didn't know if I was hurting myself, but I figured it was just part of the story, so part of my journey. So I kept doing it, and I do it all the time these days. I mean, I hear the connective tissue just letting go multiple times each day. And I've recently had an x-ray taken, new x-ray taken in my head, and I can see how my skull has come more into alignment than it used to be. My eye sockets have aligned, my jaw has centered, my neck has straightened. And these are things I didn't know were possible. So that's why I'm sharing my story, because I want people to know what is actually possible through letting go of stored emotions. There we go.
Now that's some mind and body integration there, if you ask me. Really quick, I just want to ask, in case people are not familiar with tapping, when you say tapping, what does that mean?
Sure. The technique itself is called EFT, which is short for Emotional Freedom Technique. We call it tapping because that's what we're doing as we're talking through an event that happened, or a feeling we're having, a pain we're having. We're tapping on the ends of meridian points. There's a certain set of 10 points that we tap on as we're talking through the event. And it could just be a word or someone's name. Whatever it is that has emotions, we're tapping on these meridian points. As we're doing that, it's letting the tension or the energy that's stuck in the body, it's just letting it release and flow out.
These points that we're tapping on, they're called meridian points, right?
Yeah, they're the ends of meridian systems.
Okay, and just for newcomers, the meridian system, is this sort of some system of energy channels, or how would a new person understand it?
Yeah, so this is almost like acupressure, right, which is working with those energy points in the body. I now know that they're part of the connective tissue or the fascia system, and that's where all this tension is stored. So yeah, the person who developed it, Gary Craig, he worked out those were the most important points, and they made the biggest difference. So those are the points that we stick with.
Got it. Thanks.
I love EFT. EFT is great. And I love that you have tapped through everything and you were like, I wanted more. And it's such a great mindset to have, So I thought that was great. And on top of that, for EFT, when you do the scripts, I'm used to doing tapping through the head and the face and the shoulders and everything, but I didn't know that you're able to just say a word and tap through and it'll help release.
Yes, I never really went with the scripts. What we want to do is get down the neural pathway, our own neural pathway that has that energy stored inside of us. A lot of people use scripts, but when you're using scripts, you're using someone else's neural pathway, right? It might resonate with them, but it doesn't necessarily resonate with us. The other thing about EFT is, when it started out, it was purer. Obviously, it's kind of morphed over the years, and it's gone more towards the positive. People do a little bit of tapping on the negative, and then they try and imprint the positive. But because I can sense inside my body, the only barrier I find inside the body is tension, and that's the negative. And that's the power to me, that's the power of EFT, is it works on the negative. And that's all we need to work on. So we just work on the stuck energy. We don't, underneath that tension on the inside is darkness. And once you let go of that darkness, that tension, the light is already there. And again, that's something I didn't see or sense until I had got there, and or till I've released some tension. Then I can see underneath, oh, really, it was dark. And now it's light, just kind of with my dad. Same with my dad's words, had to go beyond to be able to see that. So that's where the power of EFT is just working on that negative stuck energy, which, we don't think we should go there. People say, don't go to the negative these days, but that's where the power is.
So it's almost like as we go through life, and experience these various traumas or mini traumas or problems in life, we take those on as tensions in our body. And if we don't address it, we just keep accumulating more and more tensions. And so this is a technique you're saying that can release those tensions.
It can, yeah. I believe we do store it. You know, when people get old, they tend to shrink down and get tighter and smaller. I think that's because we're holding so much, and we do replay it over and over again, and it gets tighter and tighter. And this, I believe, releases that tension, and it's stuck in the connective tissue. So I actually do believe that this can reverse aging. Of course, time will tell, but that's my belief on the theory at this point.
Completely understand. This is everything that you're saying is just amazing, and that's a wonderful. It's so smart to think of the fact that when people get old, they're shrinking down because they're holding on to so much, and that's something that I haven't touched base on yet in my own mind. So that's great to chew on. On top of that, about the EFT, yes. So I appreciate, number one, your perspective on how, you know, all the power is where the negative is, you know, and it's like, if you're just sort of repeating words on top of the negative that's already stored in your body in your neural pathways through your experiences, then you're kind of just masking it up. You're kind of throwing like a Band-Aid on it. And that's not what we want to do. You know, we want to feel that. We got to know what it is, you know, so it's very brave to tap through your emotions and really feel those emotions, but it's such a beautiful thing. And what I wanted to get to was, okay, so when you're saying about the negative and you feel the negative, and then underneath is all the light, so it's already there. It's not like you necessarily need to put it in. But there's like a two-part question to this, right? So the first question is, when you're doing that, what are the thoughts that are going through your mind? Are there any thoughts that come up like, oh my God, what is this? Oh my God, what am I doing? Oh my God, this is scary. Oh my God, it feels like a piece of me is dying. What if I die? Do these thoughts go through your head as you are tapping through the negative? Or what do they sound like?
Yeah, I mean, to begin with, it is kind of scary you kind of feel like you might be annihilated by these feelings that are there when it's a really big trauma that we're working with. So it's good to experience the way it works on something smaller first, right? So that you know the freedom is beyond. So you can look back and say, okay, yeah, it's not going to annihilate me. It's just stored tension. It's just stored energy. That's all it is, right? Because it doesn't exist anywhere else anymore, right? The memories only exist inside of us. So it's not going to annihilate us. It's just stored energy, and we can let it go. So the what's going on in the mind thing is interesting. You know, as we're tapping, that's what we tap on, right? If I was feeling that or thinking that at the time, I would be tapping saying, oh my God, what's going to happen? Oh my God, what's going to happen? Coming in the present with those thoughts as you're tapping is really important, but it gets easier as we go along. We start to suppress less and less and become more aware of what we're actually thinking and feeling, that's the expansion of awareness that happens. And now when I'm putting my awareness inside my body, or at least when I started doing it, I wasn't thinking, I was only feeling. So that's where I realized, you know, this is what I believe is the word insight, the original meaning of the word insight. And it's not in the thinking mind, it's in the feeling mind. Now I can multitask, so I can do the inner work and the outer work at the same time. But to begin with, I couldn't.
Yeah, I want to come back again, taking on the newcomer's perspective. I can imagine somebody listening or watching to this and thinking, oh, okay, where do I have tension? Oh, yeah, in my back. Okay. And let me tap there. But like, I know there's a few more nuances to it. So first of all, how do you find out where in your body certain memories or emotional traumas are being stored. Maybe it's in the arm, maybe it's in the leg. I guess, I don't know. How do you find out where it's located?
Right. So this is the expansion of awareness that starts, right? That it's a progression. So to begin with, I wasn't aware of any of this, right? I was just aware of something that happened. So for example, my dad shouted at me, right? Those are just the words of something that happened. And that's what I would tap on. We're tapping on the same 10 points each time. That, you can find them on the internet. They're all over the place if you look up EFT points. And we just tap through the same points with my dad shouted at me. Now, as I let go of the tension around those words, my dad shouted at me, then I might ask myself or remember, okay, it was scary when my dad shouted at me. And then I can tap on that feeling of feeling scared when my dad shouted at me, right? Then at some point, and it took me months maybe to actually become aware of, okay, what's that feeling? Where am I feeling that fear of my dad shouting at me? And for me, it's mostly in my solar plexus. A lot of people do hold it in their shoulders, but it takes some awareness to be able to find that. Now, some people are aware of those kind of sensations already. And if you can feel fear or tension in your shoulders, you can tap on tension in my shoulders. I can feel this tension in my shoulders, or fear in my abdomen. Whatever it is that you're feeling, that's what you would tap on. Does that help?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, good.
So, which leads me to the second part of that question. When you're removing all of that negativity and your regular, natural, innate, beautiful light thoughts are there, do you still tap in more good thoughts, sort of in the form of like affirmations? So it's like our most natural selves, pretty much is what you're saying, is just hidden under all of the negativity. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, once you let go of the negativity, compassion and understanding arises and new thoughts arise, which is really cool.
Interesting. The way that I started my journey into healing myself and being the best me that I can be, I started with affirmations, right? So the affirmations, and then I was saying the affirmations, but they weren't true yet. So they were kind of weird, right? So then I found out declarations, and, I realized that affirmations and declarations are completely different. And so then I just started pretty much reprogramming my mind through going through my inner and outer worlds of the past, present, and future, which is sort of what you're doing when you're tapping through your emotions. But I didn't get into tapping until maybe like a year ago, if not a little bit less. But my mind has already been, for the very, very most part, reprogrammed. So it's very interesting to think about the fact that, because it's like, what if there's something, if you didn't know about EFT, and those affirmations and those declarations are just the light hidden under all of the negativity that you can veto, exit, I don't know the word that I can think of, diminish, incinerate the negative into light, right? What if all of those declarations that anyone or myself was saying before EFT were just the light that was hidden under the negativity? And if you go through EFT, then you would come to almost an even deeper arrival, that the work that you've done before and all of the thoughts that you've been thinking all this time that have been shining out are actually the thoughts that have been there all along, the most natural, innate you.
Yeah, that is an interesting point. And one I've actually wondered myself, it's like, if you do all that, is the negative still there, right? It's the things that you didn't address at the time still there. And at this point, I suspect they are, and that you've just added some positives, so that it's not really a pure thought still, like, because I think there's still some wobble in it, because the negative is probably still stored inside somewhere. That's my thought. It's not a great thought to have, but based on my experience, I went to something a long time ago where we did a change of some memory And we actually really did change it. And I can never actually get back to that memory. I remember what happened around it. I don't remember what was there exactly before we changed it in this event. And I think inside, I think that is now somewhere that's actually covered up. It's a negative thing that's covered up. And I don't think that's a good thing. I think it's better just to let all that negative just flow out of the body and be gone, and just have the positive that's there underneath the right. Now, I don't actually tap in the positive. I know you mentioned that earlier. It doesn't feel quite right for me to do that. So I just work on the negative and then let whatever happens. I actually, do you know Abraham Hicks? Are either of you familiar with Abraham Hicks?
Love her.
Okay.
Love her.
So I was sat in the hot chair with her one time a couple of years ago. And I asked that question because I wanted to know, she talks about two ways. She talks about just kind of going with the flow, just letting everything just happen and arise as it will. Or she talks about trying to create your reality, molding the clay, she calls it. And I asked her, so which is the best? Why would you do one over the other? And she said, well, either's fine. It's just more fun to be able to play in the clay. Once you've got used to, once you're good with the going with the flow, then it's more fun to play in the clay. So right now I'm just kind of going with the flow. I'm letting out the negative just to see what happens. And I actually search out the negative. You know, I now watch the news again. I want to see what still brings up emotion in me. Now that I know when I'm suppressing something or when I'm not. So I'm just bringing up more and more that I can clear out from inside.
Wow, that's pretty significant. And I think, I mean, the words I wrote down that you used earlier was you kept that suppressed. I think that was one of the things you said early on.
Can I just say something about suppression?
Yeah, please do.
So we suppress so much that we have no idea of. And, you know, I had no idea when I started how much I stored inside. I mean, just crazy amounts. But, you know, on a day-to-day basis, you know, even the positive thinking movement, right, where people try and think a positive thought, you know, it could go back to the affirmations, but when you try and think a positive thought, you're actually suppressing the actual thought that you're having. So even that is suppression. And if we accepted the actual thought we're having, whatever it is, if we accepted it and tapped it out, tapped the energy around it out, then another thought, a better thought would actually come to mind. So it's an interesting process to experience, but it really does change things.
Right. So an example would be like, if you're you think you're going to have a panic attack or something, and you might at first try to think positively and just ignore the thought and be like, I'm not going to have a panic attack. It might be better, you're saying, to just release it instead by facing it and accepting it and saying, I'm afraid of having a panic attack, but you tap on your body while you're saying that. And by doing that, you kind of release it from being stored as tension in your body. Am I understanding it right?
Right. So that would be the first step. You know, I'm afraid of having a panic attack. Then what am I actually feeling? Am I feeling overwhelmed? I'm feeling overwhelmed. There's just so much to do and I feel panicky. So you talk through exactly what you're feeling and you just get deeper and deeper. You know, I've not had a panic attack, so I can't talk through that. But underneath is probably real feelings. It's like, okay, I'm afraid of going to visit my family at Christmas. It could be something like that the fear is just building up inside of me. And I can feel it building up inside of me. For those listening, I'm tapping as I'm saying this. So you just talk through the actual feelings. And as you do that, the tension should dissipate.
Robert and I had just come maybe like 3 or 4 weeks ago. We were talking about, you know, we do enter the mind, but it's like, we don't think ourselves into a good life like we do, but like we really feel ourselves. Like we can think all we want, but if we don't feel that we're in the life that we want to be in, then we won't be in it. So I feel like everybody's moving to a new consciousness, a new level of awareness that it's in the body. It's in the body. It's so, whoo, it's freaking cool.
We are so cut off from the body though. So let me tell you this story from before COVID, because to me, it really illustrates a lot of this. So I had a group and we would meet, we would tap, but at the beginning of the group, we would all sit in a semicircle and I would play a series of chimes. We would have our eyes closed. I would just play a series of chimes. We would open our eyes and we would share the experience. Now, some of the people, those with less awareness, and this is where I used to be, would just hear the chimes with their ears. Some of the others would hear the chimes with their ears, but they would also feel some of the vibrations in their body. And others with the most awareness would actually feel the sound vibrations throughout their body, deep inside their body. So there's a different experience that all of those people are having in daily life as they're listening to sounds or to people talk. And now the people who only hear with their ears, they now know this whole depth of awareness that they have not yet experienced. And those people who already come in with a fair amount of awareness can now know that, oh, there are people out there that don't have this depth of awareness and only hear things with their ears. So to me, that's just a great example of the variations that we can experience. Now, one person hearing the word hospital is going to have a very different experience than someone who just hears it with their ears. It's just a word hospital. Then they're not aware of probably the memories or the depth of that word or the emotions around it. They are not aware of that. And we see that, I think, a lot today in everything that's happening. There's a lot of people out there with very little awareness, and there's a lot of people with a great depth of awareness, and it's very different for all of them.
I think all of this is really coming together for me conceptually. And I wrote down this quote as I was going through your YouTube videos the other day, and it seems to tie into this concept. So the quote was, you said, when we were children, a parent might see us with clenched fists and a tight jaw and say that we are angry. And then we start to dissociate from the physical feelings, and we go with the mental concept of the word angry. And we no longer realize that our jaw is tight and our fists are clenched. And that, when I read that, that was like a truth bomb in my mind. I was like, whoa, that's so true. Like, because you're maybe 5 years old, you're angry, you're like this, and then your parents say, why are you angry? Don't be so angry. And you start to, the word anger is it's language, it's a word, it's up here, intellectual mind. And it takes you so far out of the moment of, this is what my body is doing. My fists are clenched, my jaw is clenched. And I feel like that is the pathway for every human being. Like every adult out there on planet Earth has progressed from actually being really within their bodies to being completely in their mind and out of their bodies.
Absolutely. And this is reversing that process. So this is taking someone who just knows or feels the sound, hears the sound in their ears. It's taking them, expanding their awareness back into their body so that they can be aware at a much deeper level. And, that awareness on the inside, that depth of awareness on the inside actually creates a depth of awareness on the outside. So, to begin with, there was no awareness to begin with, but at this point, I can see so many more different perspectives than I used to be able to before. Now that's also physical, because this release of tension in the fascia has released my neck. So I can move and actually see in more physical perspectives than I could before. But then that translates to also being able to see other perspectives outside of me. But I can also see tension in other people. I can see where they're holding their body tight. I can see how deeply they're breathing, which parts they're not breathing into, because I have that awareness inside myself. So I can see it in other people. So that's really fun to me, that, that adds a depth to life that was never there before, makes life so much more satisfying.
Definitely. Yeah. I imagine a lot of people out there also have questions. And what would be the best way for them to follow up and learn more about your techniques and possibly get in contact with you?
Sure. Well, my book is out there. It's called A Pathway to Insight. It's available on Amazon, or you can have your bookstore order it. That tells the whole story. It goes through all the different steps that I went through, in case I would love other people to go through those steps as well. You can also check me out on my public Facebook page. I'm loving using that right now and explaining different memes and quotes that other people are putting up there. I'm explaining it from my experience. And I have my website, annhince.com, that you can contact me on.
Thank you so much for your time and for coming on the show and sharing your stories.
Thank you. I love deep conversations like this. It's great.